Today, we are going to try and crack open the AI black box. We're going to look at not just what these incredible models know, but how they actually think, especially when they're not so sure about the answer.
So let's just jump right into it. We spend so much time benchmarking AIs, right? We throw questions at them, we check if they get the right answer, but that's only telling us a little piece of the story. The really big question, the one that actually matters, is this. What is the quality of the reasoning behind that answer? Can an AI tell when its own logic is kind of wonky or when it should maybe, take a step back and reconsider?
Here's an easy way to think about it. A final exam, it just cares about your final answer. It's a checkbox. A psychological evaluation, though, that tries to understand your whole thought process, your self-awareness, how you deal with being uncertain. Well, right now, most AI tests are basically just final exams. What we really need is the psychological evaluation.
And there's actually a word for this. It's called metacognition. Now, it's a concept from human psychology, but wow, is it incredibly relevant for AI. It's basically the ability to think about your own thinking, to step back, look at your own thought process and ask, wait, does this actually make sense? Am I really confident in this? Should I maybe change my mind here?
So how do you measure something like that? Well, a group of researchers has developed a brand new kind of stress test for AI models. It's called MEDLEY-BENCH, and it is specifically designed to get at this tricky thing called behavioral metacognition. Okay, so here's how this whole thing works. It's pretty clever. First, in step 1, the AI gets an ambiguous problem to solve all by itself. Then, in step 2, it's asked to review its own answer, but privately. This is all about measuring its knack for self-correction. And then finally, in step 3, things get social. It's shown the work of 8 other anonymous AIs, plus a summary of what the group consensus is. And this is the real test. How does it react? Does it stick to its guns if its own logic is solid? Does it thoughtfully change its mind when it sees a better argument? Or does it just cave under peer pressure? All right, so they ran this test on 35 different AI models, and the results, well, they were absolutely fascinating. They uncovered some fundamental and frankly pretty surprising truths about where AI is at today. So just take a look at these charts for a second. The big takeaway here is this really interesting split. As the models get bigger and more powerful, and that's what you see moving from left to right here, their ability to evaluate good reasoning, that's the orange line, it generally goes up. They get better at recognizing a good argument when they see one. But look at that blue line. That's their ability to control their own thinking and resist caving in. It's basically flat. Getting bigger doesn't make them wiser or more independent thinkers. The researchers have a perfect name for this. They call it a systematic knowing-doing gap. Basically, the AIs know what good reasoning looks like, but they don't always use that knowledge on their own thinking, especially when they're feeling the heat. It is a classic case of do as I say, not as I do. And this heat map just illustrates that point perfectly. It shows the relative strengths and weaknesses of every model they tested. So red means it's a relative strength, and blue means it's a relative weakness. Now just look at that evaluation column. I mean, it is a sea of blue for every single one of the 35 models. What this tells us is that compared to their other skills, like monitoring themselves or controlling their output, evaluating reasoning is universally their biggest weak spot. It's their Achilles heel.
And believe it or not, it gets even more interesting. When the researchers really started to turn up the pressure, they found that AIs don't all react the same way. In fact, you start to see 2 very distinct personalities emerge.
This cognitive map shows it beautifully. To get this, the researchers set a little trap. They made the group consensus, the popular vote, point in one direction, while the actual written arguments pointed in the complete opposite direction. This forced the AIs to make a choice. Are you going to follow the logic, or are you going to follow the crowd? And as you can see, they split into 2 very clear groups. So this revealed these 2 types of AI thinkers. On one side, you've got the argument evaluators, like Claude Haiku. These are the ones that really focus on the substance of the arguments. They're kind of like someone who carefully reads an entire article before making up their mind. But then on the other side, you have the statistics followers, like Mistral Small. These models just track the consensus. They see which way the wind is blowing and they just follow the majority. It doesn't matter what the underlying evidence says. They're like someone who only reads the headline and just goes with the crowd. But hold on, because here's where it gets really wild. This metacognitive skill, this thinking about thinking, it isn't just about being big and powerful. The study found something they call the underdog effect. Smaller, cheaper models like Claude Haiku, which, by the way, ranked #1 overall, and GPT 4.1 Nano often showed better metacognition than their larger, more famous siblings. This just completely flips the script on the common idea that bigger is always better in the world of AI. So, okay, We've got AIs with this knowing-doing gap, and we've got AIs that are really susceptible to groupthink. So what? Why is this so important to understand? What are the actual real-world stakes here?
Well, the implications are absolutely huge. Think about high-stakes fields like medicine or finance. An AI that just follows the consensus could easily amplify a mistaken diagnosis or a disastrous investment strategy. But by understanding these profiles, we can build smarter AI teams, maybe combining a model that's great at self-monitoring with another one that's really good at resisting pressure. It helps us pick AIs that won't just create more digital echo chambers. And crucially, it means we can actually screen these models for how vulnerable they are to social pressure before we unleash them on the real world.
So when you boil it all down, we're left with this. As we keep building more and more powerful AI, we have a really important choice to make. Do we keep optimizing for models that are just masters of giving eloquent, super confident-sounding answers, or do we start to focus on building models that have the wisdom to question themselves, to value evidence over popularity, and, most importantly, to know when they might be wrong? The answer to that question is really going to define the future of what we call intelligence.